Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come visit with us. We're excited to share what we have been working on for the past year. My name is Carrie Fox, and I'm an educator here at the Oklahoma History Center Museum, and I will let my colleague introduce himself.
I'm Adrian Pan, and I'm currently a senior at the Oklahoma School of Science and Math.
So we are talking about today how to develop more inclusive stories by working with underrepresented communities in museum spaces. One of the things that I think we can all agree with is that that has continued to be something that we want to work towards, and we have not completed that work yet. So any ideas that you have that you can bring to the table, we would love to hear them. This is a space where we are just kind of brainstorming what works well in making sure that we are doing our best job in telling a more complete, more expansive Oklahoma history. So the first thing that I think about whenever I get started on a project is the mission of the Oklahoma Historical Society. And there's two pieces to that. So this is on our email, it's on all of our communications. You can read it right now, I think, in the handout that you've received. The mission of Oklahoma Historical Society is to collect, preserve, and share the history and culture of the state of Oklahoma and its people. And the thing for me is I think we've done that extremely well in some capacities, but we really have a lot of work to do. It being 2024, the state is over 100 years old in telling the story of all of the people of Oklahoma. So I asked myself, who do we serve well? Who do we need to serve well? And who are we not serving? So that's how I kind of think about where do we need to head next? What projects do we need to focus on? And then another way I talk about it with interns is as you walk through the galleries, who is not on those walls? Who is not represented in those galleries? And the thing I love about the responses that I receive is it's very dependent on the person that is receiving the information of the gallery. So Adrian might have an objection to younger people or students or individuals with Chinese heritage. But other people may say, I don't see any people with obvious disabilities on the wall. I don't see people who have experienced extreme poverty on the wall. And it's having a staff and interns and volunteers that have all of those experiences that help us to tell those stories. Do you have anything to add to that, Adrian?
Yeah, so basically for the trunk that me and Carrie worked on, we had this mission at heart, and then so we decided that Asian American history was actually very absent from mainstream histories these days, so that's why we decided to start our AAPI Oklahoma trunk.
And I don't know if you would agree with this. We haven't practiced our presentation, but I don't know if you would agree with this, but it seems like to me, Asian American history is really centered on Chinese exclusion, and that in no way addresses the breadth of Asian American history in the state at least, or the nation. So we felt like this was a very important thing to do. We actually had this on our schedule to do in 2 years. But then I met you, and I got prodding from other folks, and I was like, well, I guess we're going to push some other things out of the way to work on this. So now we move to the actual developing of this trunk. What had happened was I met Adrian at a National History Day competition. It was completely random. He did a project on Chinese exclusion in the United States. It was a website. It was exemplary, and it sent him to the nationals. Unfortunately, he did not win, right? So, and then in that way, we connected. We both agreed that this story needed to be told, and we started trying to think of ways to do that. So I would say that the first step in including building a more inclusive history is to find Adrian. And so he is not going to be available for the next few years to work on our projects because he is going off to college. And so, regretfully, we'll have to find other folks that can help us for sure. I say it jokingly, but I actually mean it. Adrian has a deep passion of sharing Chinese history. What in our conversations, I think that one of the things I'm most impressed about, particularly with someone who is as young as Adrian is his deep understanding about the power of history. And so that and sharing culture are things that you need to find in a person that is in the community that you're studying so you can partner. Because I cannot do this on my own. So I had to find Adrian to do it. So, any additions?
Yeah, she found me.
The next thing that we did in order to develop this trunk was to conduct basic research, which that's, I don't know if you agree with this, but like the basic research part is less exciting than meeting a new friend and learning about their life and hearing about like their travels from halfway across the world and how that all happened. But it is the thing upon which everything else is built, and so you have to do your research. I feel like, and this is just as an outsider of many communities I've studied, if they're spending their time with you doing basic education that you could learn on your own, then that's not time well spent for them, nor is it necessarily as respectful as you could be if you came in with a working knowledge of what that history looks like. And then what that looked like for us was, Adrian, what did you work on in this part?
I was just trying to find like documentation of early Asian history in Oklahoma, but that was very challenging to find. So we didn't have like a lot of sources to go off of.
Yeah, the first thing we did was we checked with all the different kind of collections. So Western History Collection, Carl Albert, come on in, please do. And that was very eye-opening about how important this history is because, you know, it's not like Asian American history, particularly from territorial early statehood time, was just sitting there waiting for somebody to write it up into a book. That was some hard work to get into. And so all the responses you got on the questions about different research places was no. Yeah. we don't have anything, which is kind of a hit in the gut when you're starting out and you're doing your history, I would think. So the other thing you did was you checked with different cultural groups.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
recall that?
Yeah, and most of the time I didn't get a response.
So it doesn't, I mean, as we all know, I see nods in agreement. Sometimes the work you do doesn't lead someplace, but you just kind of keep chipping away. What I did, which was probably a mistake, I think if it were up to me, I would now switch it because you have more discipline than I do, which I went into newspaper research and started trying to find that evidence, right? And I looked through dissertations. I feel like the main thing I do with my time is read dissertations. Oh, that's my fun time. Never mind. But what I would say to that is it's all there. So you can build this history, but it is plodding, difficult work, reconstructing all of that. I wish somebody had, mistakenly written a book about early Asian American history in Oklahoma and never got it published, and then I could come back and be like, look at how amazing I am. But that did not happen. We had to go through page after page of newspapers, and I don't know when to say no. I think you would have stopped when you needed to. So, but we're developing a pretty good archive, I think. Yeah. Oh, the other thing we did was we checked for old exhibits. So I'm relatively new at the Oklahoma History Center, and Adrian is relatively new. And so we didn't know that they had done an exhibit on the Chinese experience in Oklahoma. And fortunately, they had saved a lot of the interviews, they had saved a lot of the material, and that's going to be utilized in some of our work as well. The next thing that we did was create a project plan. I believe in this project plan a lot. It's like my constitution for a project. Adrian, why don't you kind of describe what went into the project plan?
So we decided which regions of Asia we wanted to include in our trunk, and we were very specific about how we wanted to give each region equal representation, because one of the issues when we were conducting basic research was that a lot of our sources were for more mainstream groups like Chinese, Vietnamese, but we wanted to represent other groups as well equally, from India and other parts of Asia. So we came up with these research questions for each group, and then what we wanted to investigate about each group.
We also, for some parts of it, when we were trying to attract more interest, maybe from funding groups or things like that, we would modify it as something to give to folks who might be interested in helping us fund this project. If any of you are billionaires and are interested in funding a great project, we're still looking for help. So the other thing that we would occasionally, we had a main piece that was ours, and then we shared it out with other folks, and we modified that communication. Go ahead.
Like I was saying, that I'm going to have to be leaving because my grandfather was a Choctaw code talker, so I have to go to the event next door. But I know from teaching in the inner city in Oklahoma City that if you go in and teach the students with respect that you teach the kids in the exurbs, they really, really respond. So, you go to me, it was obvious when you saw students carrying Ralph Ellison's book to the English classes, you stopped your history class and you started teaching him growing up in Oklahoma City.
Right.
What I would be doing now if I was still teaching is we've got two really well-known, award-winning authors from the Oklahoma City area. Was it the first book, Vietnamese author, was it Storm in Seattle, and another one. Her books are great. There is everything that's true is false or something like that from the Iranian American writer in Edmond. We've got, 3 New Yorker writers right now who are writing about, contemporary Oklahoma from an international perspective because they come from different backgrounds. I would go and just pull together these pieces of literature that start with Oklahomans from the background that brought them to Oklahoma, and then see how you can, have some book discussions and things like that, and build out from that.
Yeah.
And is what, being a former teacher, is what I would recommend in getting history and English teachers and people like that, having these discussions of these incredible authors.
Yes, and we'll include those books in the trunk. So we always try to make sure to include some media in there and use that as a stepping point because sometimes we'll have librarians just check out the trunk to see what we've gotten on that particular topic, or maybe you have an English teacher that's interested. So we have a wide variety of teachers that use our material, so we want to make sure that they are well equipped in any regard to be able to do that. I appreciate your comments, and I hope you enjoyed the next presentation you're going to. We also would go back and assess where we were at. There was, at first, I think that we were super focused on mainland China because they have such, it's kind of like such a massive impact and importance. But then we reconsidered and we thought to ourselves, you know what, the Taiwanese, the Hong Kong folks who live here have their own separate history. So we're going to have to include that as well. So that is an example. We also, the next thing that we started with was working with your personal network. There's a lot of people that think you should go at it more neutrally or more, I don't know how you would say it, but more professionally, I guess. But to me, I just don't see how you get rid of the kind of personal bias, because those people love you, hopefully, and they want to help you. And so if you know folks that can work with you, then, gee, you're already up one rung on the ladder. So, Adrian, go ahead and talk about you.
So this is my dad at my dog's birthday. So we interviewed him for his story. And then, I also reached out to a lot of my classmates and friends and their parents. And then my family also goes to a Chinese church, so we have a lot of resources there. And that was how I used my personal network to try to find more sources for our trunk.
And for me, I am a former educator, and I try to keep into contact with students that I've had. So this student right here is Locke, and Locke, I taught him in 7th grade, and he has been educating me on what life is like he was actually a Vietnamese immigrant. He came to this country when he was 4 years old in 2000, I believe, which surprised me. It kind of pushed back against my expectations that he would be a child of immigrants, because I had in my head that immigration for Vietnamese folks took place in between probably 78 to, maybe the late 80s. But no, this migration continues. Vietnamese folks are continuing to join us and become new Oklahomans still to this day. I know that's still I think in many schools, the third most prominent bilingual second language. So that means there's more and more folks coming. And so that has been a helpful relationship, but I've also tried to make sure that I am connecting with Sadie, our multicultural officer here at the Oklahoma Historical Society. Now, the thing about Sadie is she's a resource for us at OHS, but I have never known her to say no. So even if you're not with the OHS, if you have questions about connecting with a particular cultural group, feel free to shoot her an email. She is the most extroverted person I have ever met in my whole life. So she is a great asset to us. So we did try to mitigate leaning too heavily on our peer group by doing cold calls and things like that, making requests at conferences and going to different events. So we were aware that we could be leaning into kind of a biased circle and have tried to break through that. So expand the conversation to community members you don't know. And I'm going to let you talk about how we did this part.
So we basically cold called or emailed a lot of the community leaders that we've heard about at conferences or other events. And then we just asked them to speak with us about their story, their community they come from. And we did this because we believe that the individual stories and perspectives brought a kind of human aspect to our trunk and helped the viewers of our trunk really relate to the people here, because they can see that, these people are just also human. So that's why we interviewed all these people and we collected their stories to use as sources for our trunk.
And I've loved every interview we've done, but one that was great in particular, but we didn't do a good job of documenting it, we just recorded it on the phone, was with Miss Penny and Priya. Oh, yeah. And that was really fun. Miss Penny was an Indian woman, but she was by way of Madagascar. So that story was wild, and she had strong opinions. And so that was just a joy, like one of the best afternoons I've spent working here. We use those oral histories to then go back and pull for our, if you're not familiar with our trunks, we have a curriculum guide that educates teachers, and you know what that looks like for each trunk is largely dependent on the trunk, but for this one, it's going to focus on an individual, but it's going to speak to the larger, broader themes and historical forces that are at play. And I think that that's going to be really, really good. The next thing is allowing the community to direct you. So I've always had a struggle with thinking about am I the appropriate person to be doing this work where I'm focusing on cultural groups I'm not a part of? Is that even something that I can do in an ethical way? And so what I have kind of thought about is I view it as taking the toolbox I learned in college and just taking what community members tell me and working on it with my tools, right? So maybe they don't have the time to write all this stuff down, but they do have the interest, or maybe they don't have the, they haven't conquered English perfectly yet or anything like that, and they are hesitant to speak in that way. So then I can come and partner with them and help tell that story. So what that looks like for me is work at different times. It doesn't feel like work though, of course. So going to an Asian festival where I get to try all the different foods, it's rough being me, is one way. But we met tons, you didn't go to that, Adrian, my sister did. So we met tons of people at this Asian festival that we went to last year, which is being held right now, and I'm missing it, sadly. The other thing was I met up with some Zomi folks. So if you're not familiar, the Zomi are a particular ethnic group from a place called Myanmar. It used to be called Burma, and they have been very targeted by the government there, causing a migration outward. And they are very centered in Jinx, Oklahoma. So they actually invited me to their museum, which is in a house. And so this is an example of traditional Zomi clothing that they had in the house, and I took a bunch of pictures. I got to ask a bunch of questions. I hope to go to the Marshall Islanders celebration in the summertime that they will be having. That looks super fun, but I haven't gotten to that one yet. Adrian, what about you?
Yeah, so we also have like artifacts in our trunk that represent the different cultures, and we were aware that or the people we were representing, so we wanted the people to be able to like have input on what we should put in the trunk to represent them. So we were also wanted to emphasize that. And we also we asked them like what part of their stories they want to include, and we just wanted the people that we were representing to be able to have a deciding factor in how they would be represented.
The next thing that we would suggest is keeping contact. And if you're thinking about this from a whole institution perspective, these can be your, future board members. These can be your members in your organization. It doesn't just mean for that particular project. But for our project, we stayed in contact. So I sent that picture right there of this woman. This is a woman from Madagascar in traditional dress, and this Penny, to ask her if she recognized that kind of clothing. She didn't. And then this is Cassie, who went to the Philippines for the first time in her memory. She went when she was 1, but she doesn't remember that trip. But she went with her family to the Philippines, and we're going to make a little kid book out of her experiences because she sent me a bunch of pictures. And then this is me and my friend Serena talking about Taishan and Guangdong and how folks were moving from there. And so that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, and then everyone I contacted, I always made sure to keep following up with them if they had any more input on the trunk or anything else they wanted to add or share. And I think it's just good practice to keep contact, keep the connections you made, and you never know when they can help you in the future.
Indeed. We also asked for material. Again, having some control over how you're represented is great, but also finding material. So we went around and asked the folks that we had interviewed if they had any photographs, is what I focused on. If they want to donate objects, that's absolutely fine, but that, I don't know. To me, asking somebody to donate something that is cherished is not something that I'm going to ask when I've just met you, right? So I don't do that. But if they choose to do that, then it is warmly and deeply appreciated.
Yeah, so we would just ask the people we're representing for any material they want to be put in the trunk, and then just see how it turns out.
The next thing you do is share results. So my friend Serena, her grandfather actually had a restaurant in Enid called the Three Towers Restaurant, and his name was Bob Marr. He was a cornerstone to that community, and she is trying to uncover that history. So it doesn't make sense to me that I'm going to keep that to myself. So I have a little folder where I find stuff on there. I put it in the folder, and she can look at it if she wants to and comment on it if she wants to. And then, do you have anything to add?
We had newspapers from someone that it goes to my church, and then I just keep contact with him, ask him what part of the newspaper he wants in the trunk, and try to make sure he has input.
The last step is to be grateful. This is time and effort and energy that people are giving to us instead of their lives, their children, their work. So making sure to make them aware that we value what they are doing is really probably the most important piece. So for me, one thing that looks like is advocating for folks here. So a lot of times I struggle with asking for people without the ability to reciprocate. I need this from you, but perhaps in the future they need an event space. I can work to try to make sure that my management understands what those folks have contributed and that they should be working in partnership with these folks. And so what I have needs to become available to them. And that's kind of how I think about it. We also did simple things like send out thank you notes and stuff like that. So we'll have a big party too. You're all invited when we get the trunk done. And then dues, I would say, this is kind of how I would summarize. Go to the community. If you talk about what you're going to do without making those connections, which can be at any time of the day, any place, then you're probably not going to get very far. Do you have anything to add to that one?
I would say I would just encourage everyone to explore their own histories and try to make people aware of what your family, what your people went through.
You also want to keep all your commitments. You have just gone through that. Jules, my coworker, has just gone through that with somebody she was working with, and the person just wasn't consistent in meeting those meetings, and that's very frustrating. So doing that with a community member that's not being paid, that puts a bad name on your institution and you. So I would not do that. Examples, boy, I wonder why I put that there. Don't know. Ask with intention. Again, ground yourself in the research before you even start. And then listen 90% of the time and talk 10. Like, I am breaking my rule right now, but I would say if you're with somebody who's taken the time to sit down with you and educate you, you telling them about the one time you tried this particular dish is not a good use of their time, and they may have heard that more than one time. So be grateful, maintain going forward those connections, and give of yourself. And so that's where we are finished up. Does anybody have any questions? I'm putting my contact information on here. Adrian doesn't know his contact information in the future, so good luck with that. But if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.